in my lap.
Did you start it?
Yeah.
She lives in North Dakota. She lives in my lap. She hit me from her Motorola. I told her, place shot me for your iMac. I want to be her nigga, cause she's always been Tommy Hilfiger. She know my passport got the stamps. Stamps like I'm an envelope nigga.
All right, everybody. What's going on? What's going on? It's our first episode of Nomics. And Nomics, trying to use economics to make sense of the world. So let's go ahead and jump into this shit. We're gonna talk about boycotting today, because this
we don't even get to introduce ourselves.
Oh yeah. I thought because I forgot we gotta make sure the volume.
Nah, we're gonna have to redo this because I'm echoing on you.
Okay.
You need headphones.
Oh, I need headphones. Okay. Let me see. 1 second. Let's see. Dang. All right, is that better?
Yeah.
All right. All right, yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Well, no, let's just redo the whole thing. So I'm gonna start the music again.
Okay, cool.
And then we'll just cut out this whole part.
Yeah.
She lives in North Dakota. She lives in my lap. She hit me from her Motorola. I told her, place shot me for your iMac. I want to be her nigga, cause she's always been Tommy Hilfiger. She know my passport got the stamps. Stamps like I'm an envelope nigga. She lives in Arizona. I told her drink more water. She lives outside the matrix. I told her I'm a model. On the map, we be everywhere and nowhere, all over the map. I'ma find her, I'ma go there, I'ma bring her back. I'ma get her, I'ma show her, I'ma bring her back. I'ma bring her back. On the map, we be everywhere and nowhere, all over.
What's up, everybody? My name is Denzel, and
my name is Malcolm, and this is the first episode of Nomics,
where we try to make sense of the world. We try to use
Nomics rocking everywhere.
Right. Just two young economists trying to make stuff plain for everybody, and
that's a strong term.
what economists or trying to make stuff plain?
Economist.
I mean,
I have 2 degrees that say economics on them, but I still wouldn't call myself an economist.
Well,
that's more personal preference.
let's say we have a background in economics. Yeah, let's go with that just to be safe. But yeah, like basically what we're gonna try to do might be relevant to y'all, and try not to be bougie with the terms and everything. We're trying to make it plain for everybody so that people can learn from what we're talking about, and get a better understanding of what's going on around them. You want to add on to that?
No, it's a pretty good description what we're trying to do here. So hopefully, we do it pretty well. Hopefully as the time goes on, maybe we'll get better at it. But who knows? Out the gate like Jordan.
Right, right. That's the goal. That's the goal, though. But
All right. So what's this first episode supposed to be about?
So this first one's supposed to be about boycotting, right? This is a hot topic, like, the current climate, people are looking for ways to, or they say they're looking for ways to buck the system, and people like to use the word boycott when they see something they don't like. And, so we need to give some people some baseline, like, things to think about when we talk about boycotting, because the thing I've noticed is that I don't think, and this is just a guess, is my limited perception, but I don't think people fully understand like how a boycott works or what it's supposed to do. And I think we need to hash that out today. So, like, I think a good way to start this out, and I know this is very cliche, but I took the definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and I just wanted to go ahead and start off with like just a dictionary definition. So, like, according to the dictionary, it says like the definition of a boycott is to refuse to buy, use, or participate in something as a way of protesting, to stop using the goods or services of a company, country, etc., until changes are made. So basically, boycotting is very, very specialized, very particular. You're like taking your money out or your resources out of an entity, whether it be a company or a country or what have you, and you are restricting resources until a specific change is made. And I think that's a good definition to start this discussion with, because I think what happens is people forget the second half of this definition. Like they get, oh, I'm gonna take my money out. I'm not gonna buy this stuff. But forget that when you boycott, you're supposed to do that for a particular end goal. And I think a lot of people forget that. Like a lot of people forget that you have to have that. Otherwise, you end up like putting yourself in more of a hole than you did before, right? So take it for example, the what was it? No, I'll give you a perfect example. The PayPal one. Like people were trying to do a boycott with PayPal because they overheard co-founders who's no longer like associated with the company anymore. Peter Thiel. Yeah.
Like, he is a for anybody who doesn't know, Peter Thiel is part of the PayPal mafia. So it's like him, they were crazy. Reed Hastings, who created LinkedIn,
right?
The guys who created YouTube, I can't remember, they're in the PayPal mafia,
right?
Or they might not be, but the guys who created Yelp are definitely in the PayPal mafia. Elon Musk is in the PayPal mafia.
Yep.
So I don't know what they were drinking over there, but shoot, I want to drink some of it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, they clearly had some good idea.
But yeah, let's not digress too much. So Peter Thiel is like I would probably describe him as like a staunch right libertarian. But he's also gay, which is kind of oddly enough.
Oh, now that's interesting. But so yeah, not to digress too much. So basically, Peter Thiel had made a public. Didn't he make a public donation to Trump's campaign?
Yeah, 1 point something million.
Like 1.25 million, and given the way social media works, people were sharing it, and people, I don't want to make a generalization on how much they read, but they saw Peter Thiel, they saw PayPal, and they saw giving money to Trump, and the reaction that I kept seeing at least was, "Oh, I should stop using my PayPal." And it's like, okay, and you're saying you're doing this in the name of a what? Of a boycott. Okay, so you are canceling your PayPal account for what purpose? Because I mean, the premise is already flawed. Because one, Peter Thiel's a private citizen. Like he's not a part of the board anymore. I mean, although he's a co-founder, he's not a part of the board. So like, it doesn't reflect the company. And then on top of that, it doesn't. I mean, no one really has an end goal in mind. There's nothing that they want PayPal to do that would change their minds.
I mean, pretty much they're just mad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that I mean, to me, and this is a larger reflection of the reactivism that we see a lot today, where people something happens that they perceive as bad or offensive or something like that, and then they backlash and they do something as a reaction, and it doesn't really have a long-term effect like this. Because the problem is, again, there's not like one. Peter Thiel is an individual, although the co-founder, he's an individual that has no like current ties with the company. And then two, like there's nothing that people want PayPal to do different. So yeah.
So why are you? So why are
Why
you
are you doing
boycotting?
it? Exactly. Like, but and the answer is what you said, because people were mad. They saw Trump, they saw money, and they saw PayPal, and they saw red. And my thing, and what we're trying to tell y'all is, this is not how you go about boycotts. Boycotts have to be so precise, so like just very purposed in terms of what you're trying to do. Like, you need a particular goal, like tangible goal that you want to get out of a boycott in order for it to be effective. Which, I don't know, and then you could kind of get into a discussion about like that an issue with big boycotts or like nationwide boycotts, because it's kind of hard to coordinate all of that, because how many people are going to be willing to take away their money out of something that's pretty important, like, I don't know, Walmart, or something they use every day, right?
Yeah.
So, but okay, so I think it would be good to talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah, go
Let's
ahead.
go. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's do this case study and
Yeah.
go back and show a successful boycott in American history. And if you're
Right.
anywhere near half a brain, you can probably guess what boycott we're going to use.
exactly. And of course, we're going to use the Montgomery bus boycott. So I think what we're going to do, just to kind of give y'all a sort of a flow, an ebb and flow of things, we're going to show y'all. We're going to talk about this case study, or this Montgomery bus boycott, so we can give you an idea of what a successful boycott is, and then we're going to talk about some of the factors that made or break this, or made this boycott in this case. So, all right. So we got the Montgomery bus boycott. This is mid 20th century Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. Got this city. You have segregated buses. I mean, go figure, it's 1950s. It Black people have to move in the back, have to sit in the back, and if the bus is full, they have to give up their seat for a white person. This is the public transit. This is the public transit. Talking about the buses here in Montgomery. So to kind of give context to this boycott, because the thing is, this didn't just happen in a vacuum. The thing was, there were previous, like, smaller scale boycotts that had prompted folks to do this in Montgomery, right? So you had a 10-day boycott in Baton Rouge in the bus, and I'm actually not sure whether how successful, quote unquote, if you want to use that term, it was, but it had happened like 10 days ago. And it was kind of like this growing wave of boycotts. And Montgomery bus boycott was kind of the one that kind of had this ripple effect on what would later be what we would call a civil rights movement. But basically, you had Montgomery bus lines that were segregated. People were upset about Black people were upset about that. So you had the NAACP in the chapter in that area that was trying to organize folks to do something about it, right? So one of the things that they did was, I want to make sure I get this right. So feel free to correct me, but like where this begins is, and it doesn't, even though Rosa Parks was not the first to try to protest sitting in the bus against the will of the white bus drivers and what have you. She was the one who was placed there strategically to begin sort of the media campaign for this boycott. Right. So you got Rosa Parks that was put on this bus. You know, she's a respectable woman. She's like, you know, she's not, and then that's the other thing. There's this perception. I don't know where I've heard this narrative before. They try to say, oh, she was just this poor working class woman. She had a degree of respectability within the Black community. She was a part of the NAACP. She was the secretary. So it was strategic. So they put her there. They had her sit in one of the seats where, you know, a white person would sit. And everybody knows the story. She, you know, refused. You know, and she sat there and then she got arrested. Right. So the media campaign begins.
Hold on,
right?
Just before you say that, let's not forget that, was it a week before that the pregnant teen had
I'm not sure about the timeline, but it definitely was before. There was one, her name was man, I forget her name. It's, I want to say it started with an M, but it was a couple of, Claudette Colvin was one of them. I don't think, it was her. She was the teenage girl that tried to do it, and it was on 1955. It was 9 months before Rosa Parks got arrested, and so she tried to. She refused to give up her seat in the bus, and she got arrested in a similar fashion as Rosa Parks. The problem was she did not have the positional leverage that Rosa Parks did. One, she was a teenager. She wasn't an adult. Two, I believe, and I want to make sure I get this right, she was also pregnant. And I think that really
it was respectability.
Yeah, it was respectability politics. Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at here, because it played a huge role in whether or not they wanted to get behind her to start this boycott, right? So they were like, no, we need a more clean image to convince the public and whoever else that needs to see it why this is a problem and needs to change, right? So they got Rosa Parks to do it. So at this point, this is when you start to see the organizing come into play. Now, keep in mind, everybody needs to keep in mind, this is one city. Although it happened in other places, this is a very, very localized thing that's occurring. Like this is being organized on a very localized level, citywide. We're not talking about some national boycott. This is a local. This is a city. So all right. So you have the NAACP, and you have these various people that are in pastors and activists, which include Ralph David Abernathy. Different residents in Montgomery, Alabama, and then reluctantly Dr. King, because this is where Dr. King is going to get his start in the movement, because the movement made Dr. King, not the other way around. But I digress. So you start to get, I mean, it is what it is, but that's a conversation for another day. But basically, like you get these leaders and you get to the NAACP and they're saying, all right, we need, if we, since they want to keep us in the back of a bus, what we're going to do, we're going to say, fuck it. We're not going to ride the bus. We're going to make sure that we show them that our dollars count. They need to use, like, since we make up a substantial portion of proportion of Montgomery, Alabama, like, I guess people who use the public transit, we're going to pull out of that so they can stop segregating us. Keep in mind right here, there's a beginning, there's a problem, and there's a solution. There's the problem, black people being put in the back of the bus. They don't want that. Solution, they want to desegregate the bus. And so what they're doing is they're pulling out of the bus system until they make the change, which would be to desegregate bus lines, right? So keep that in mind. There's a start and there's a finish. Now, one of the things, what's also important with the boycott is they make efforts, they take these certain sustainable efforts to make sure that it works, right? And this is the stuff I think a lot of people miss today. Sustainability. Sustainability is a huge problem. One is figuring out what the solution looks like. That's the first problem. But the second problem is sustainability and like practical approaches. So the thing is, people did not ride the bus. They didn't even use the taxis. That's not talked about either. They didn't use the taxis. So what did they have to do? All right, so the NAACP said, okay, we need people to get, whoever has cars, whoever has some good shoes, you gotta be willing to walk to work. Or if you need a ride, you need people to pull, like get in the cars and carpool to get to work and back. We cannot use the bus system. And what's not talked about is they enforce that. Like they really got people to get like to stay away from getting on the bus, like black folks to get off the bus, like to not use the bus during this boycott. And that's the thing I think people forget. You have to have a sustainable strategy and you got to enforce it. Now, we can talk about what that looks like today because it's a totally different situation. We ain't there yet. So you got people that are walking and they're supplying shoes because some people, they couldn't afford their shoes because they were walking so much and their shoes get worn out. They had people who were ready to drive, and you know they had alternatives, and that's the big thing to make stuff sustainable. If you're boycotting something, especially a big entity or an important like entity in your daily life, you have to have a sustainable alternative. And so in this case, they had cars, they had people getting shoes, and they even had black taxi services, which is what isn't talked about. And so they used those too. So they started doing that. The city started noticing it, and they started. So the city responded. The city tried to find people, black people. You know, they could do this at the time, but they fined black people for basically not using the public services. They caught like them using black taxi bus drivers or something. They can't get them for having a car, but like for using black taxi services, they would upcharge they would get the black taxi services to raise their prices. And the way they did it was like, if they didn't charge more than 25 cents or something like that, they would like ding them for it. But they, that happened. And that's what people got to realize. This is a struggle. This is an ongoing struggle. Like you got a problem, you got a strategy, a sustainable strategy, you got an alternative. Now you got to deal with the pushback, because there's gonna be pushback. Like it's not like these entities are gonna sit here and be like, okay, y'all are boycotting us. We're just gonna sit and wait for it to pan out and then we'll listen. No, they're gonna actually try to push back. And so the city pushed back by trying to keep the prices high. So for taxi companies, but people held it out. And that's the thing. They held it out for, what was it? A year almost?
Over a year.
It was over a year. It was like 370
Yeah, what did you say here? December 5th, 1955 to December 20th, 1956?
Yeah, yeah. So that was well over a year. That was like a year and 15 days. So like it was a whole year. Like it's not and
They
that's the
started in
thing.
they started in December. I mean, I know it's Alabama, but
Right.
it's still cold.
Yeah, it's still cold. It's still cold. Like we may not be getting like Chicago weather, New York weather, but it's still cold. Like people were walking, people were like carpooling and and people ain't and you gotta consider some of the small stuff. Like people may not have been on time picking up people. People had to wait in the cold, if it was even cold, you
Yeah.
know.
So
But
that and that not to we
no, go
can
ahead.
finish it and get to the end, but
Yeah,
that just shows to me how our current modern day boycotts are not even close to this level.
right,
I mean, one, they had an objective. Now we can talk about whether their objective was good or not.
right, right.
Um, because I personally think that if you're going to do all of that work, you should have got something more than just desegregation. Because I never lived under segregation. I know there had to be a psychologically difficult um, experience or context in which to live. But when you look at materiality, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still poor just because they let you sit anywhere or come in and spend your money anywhere. How much did you really gain in your life from that? How much do we gain as black people from that? But that's a discussion
Yeah,
for a
yeah,
different day.
yeah. We can definitely talk about like small like arguably I won't
Well, I
call
think
them symbolic.
we need to talk about segregation versus integration. Maybe we can have another podcast about
Yeah,
that.
we'll definitely do that. So be on the lookout for that. And I think this is also talks about. I mean, this isn't quite it, but it kind of alludes to the whole like symbolic justice and material justice, and like so we can definitely talk about that too. But basically, to wrap it up though, they did this for like a year, 15 days. They carpool, did everything, and keep in mind, it wasn't just this. You actually had people like NAACP has a legal team, so they also had to have lawyers and people who had legal expertise on deck to um, to also fight this case on the Supreme Court level. So, and then what ends up happening at the end, you have a couple of things. One, you have the Supreme Court case Browder versus Gale, which ended up ruling that segregation on buses were made unconstitutional. So you had lawyers that had to be cold enough to win that case, you know. So you do have to have a level of expertise, like varying levels of expertise in a boycott as well, because it's beyond just taking your money out, especially in this case. And then the second thing, of course, this is where Dr. King gets his start, and that's pretty self-explanatory there. And then the third thing is when you get the founding of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or this is when an organization forms out of this. So overall, let's talk about what we can learn from this. Like sort of
I think the
wait,
first thing we can learn is that you can't boycott for a day.
right, right.
So all of these Black Friday boycotts or don't buy gifts on Christmas, these single day or short term boycotts, they're not going to work.
No, they're not.
They're not going to work. I mean, at the most, what you do is push. If you don't buy stuff on Black Friday, but then 2 months later you still buy everything that you would have bought,
At regular price.
right?
Right,
um, that's not a boycott. No, no, they don't care. They don't really care. And so I see some of these statistics um for those days or for Black Friday days, and they'll be like, oh, well, Black Friday is seen its least amount of sales in however many years, and I'm like, well, there are other factors there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cyber, now there's Cyber Monday.
Right.
So a lot of, that's stealing from the brick and mortar stores online and stealing from the brick and mortar stores in and of itself. So you have that, what they quote unquote call cannibalization. So eating of itself. You have that dynamic happening. Your boycott probably isn't doing much there.
Right. Right. And and the other thought too is like, why would you wait until a day where stores and companies are trying to dump their excess material and give sales to do a boycott? Why not do it during the days where there's like regular sales, no discounts? They're not trying to dump like any of their merchandise. Like,
I'll push back on that a little bit just to say that a lot of these retail stores do make their profit in those last 2 months. Like
okay, okay,
they make a bulk of their sales come in those last 2 months.
okay.
So I would push back on that a little bit. Um,
Well, let me say this. I think, well, why not extend it beyond Black Friday?
oh, I completely agree.
Yeah,
I completely
yeah.
agree. It's not effective if you don't extend it beyond Black Friday
Right.
because if you don't, then inevitably, eventually, right? There's that TV that you wanted and it was on sale on Black Friday, so you went ahead and bought it. Well, you know what? April's gonna come around and you're gonna have a tax refund check or something, and you might go
Yep.
just buy the TV then, or or
Exactly.
or, or June might come around and you just decided you wanted the TV now, and you go buy it. And hey, there's no boycott going on, so well, why am I not gonna
Yeah,
buy it? So
exactly.
you're just kind of instead of in a year-long boycott, that was a year's worth of revenue that the Montgomery bus system lost,
Right.
never to get back again. They're never going to
Exactly.
get that back again. They can't make that up. But when you talk about boycotting in a specific day and then going back to business as usual, well, that company is just like, well, I can come get your money over here then instead on this day rather than getting it on this day. And at the end of the day, that's all the same to me.
And honestly, the again, the biggest factor for me was the fact that this was hyper local. This was Montgomery, Alabama. This was nowhere else. This wasn't a nationwide thing. This wasn't even a statewide thing. It was
Yep.
this one city and this particular public service, like public
Yes.
service. So you just
Yes.
and you have people who like who could easily find an alternative to this public service. So it's like it was kind of
I,
like the perfect storm.
yeah, I
And,
think you make two really good points there. First, this was something like first you needed an alternative,
right.
right? And you need to have a viable alternative in order to be able to carry out an effective boycott. If you don't have a viable alternative, people aren't going to be able to sustain it.
Exactly.
If you tell me that I can't use the transportation system, well, I still have to go to work.
Right.
I still have to go do things. So you have to give me some alternative in order for me to be willing or able, honestly, to do that. If you're telling somebody that they're going to boycott Walmart, but Walmart is the primary source of their food or their groceries, toiletries, things that they need, necessities, then you have to provide a viable alternative. And I think a lot of the ways in which people want to boycott food sources, you have no viable alternative.
No, you don't, because people don't grow any. People don't grow anything. People don't produce their own goods. There's like a small amount of the America's population are farmers, like actual farmers. So to me, you really leave yourself ass out when you're just like, all right, we're not gonna get food from this major food source, and we don't have an alternative. Like, I mean, okay, and it's interesting because it creates localized issues in my mind, because okay, if we're doing this nationwide boycott of it, Walmart, and I'm in like rural Georgia, okay, cool. I don't really use Walmart any damn way. I I live in a rural area. There's a likelihood that I know some people who grow stuff, or shit, I probably grow stuff myself. So I know how to produce food, and that's cool. But how does that impact somebody who's like very urbanized? They live in the city, like in New York City or something like that. And even then, they might have some alternatives to Walmart that, let's say, somebody who lives in, I don't know, Nashville or like on the outskirts of a major city, that they don't have an alternative. They rely on Walmart. So it creates like these different, like sort of like variances of
Yeah,
problems.
yeah. Well,
Like,
I mean, the second thing I was going to say that you brought up a great point about is it being localized. So the boycott is something that has to be highly organized, right? Like we were saying before, you need an alternative. So you need to be able to organize around that alternative. If that alternative is going to be in the case of the bus boycott, the alternative is going to be walking
right,
or driving
right,
or carpools, whatever, people pitching in and gas, people pitching in to give shoes. You got to have the lawyers on the back end to fight the actual case and legislation. You got to
exactly.
have all of this organized. It is very hard to organize in a distributed model, which I think you're seeing some issues with in like Black Lives Matter and things like that, but we can get to that later.
Yeah,
It's hard to organize in a distributed fashion.
yeah,
And so to have a nationwide boycott, I mean, I don't know how you organize. I have no clue. To have a nationwide boycott would, to me, require type of infrastructure like a political party. Like
yeah. You would need, so in my mind, and I was actually thinking about this like long before we even were about to do this. Like, to me, you would have to be like, first off, you'd have to figure out which entities you're boycotting, right? Then you, like, again, just like with this previous boycott, you gotta all agree on what the end goal is. Like, I think people overlook that, like, because we could start this off even if we had a sustainable model, right? Even if it was like, all right, we got stores or whatever, what are we doing? Like, some people, like, if we don't really establish that, some people might be like, all right, this was cool, but Walmart's more convenient. Or you might get some people that might flip and just say screw Walmart altogether. Like, we got to figure out why we're doing it. Are we trying to shut this multinational corporation down? Are we trying to demand a certain level type of pricing or policies? Are these for the worker? Like, we're trying to do something on behalf of the workers. What are we doing? Because then it gets kind of like what you see with some movements, arguably today, like it gets kind of open ended, and it's kind of like, well, what are we doing? Like, we turned up, but now, and I don't want to mischaracterize like what's going on now, because there is some misinformation being spread around, but still, like, in effect, like in many places that's happening. Like, people don't know what they're looking for, and so it kind of becomes like this sort of chaotic kind of thing where we're trying to scramble for a solution. So I think to me, like, a boycott now, because we, first off, we live in a highly globalized economy. Like, people overlook that. So I feel like at some point, depending on the entity that we're boycotting, especially if it's a big private entity, it's gonna have to be international at some point. I don't know what that looks like, but I don't think you can keep that within the American context. But it would have to be that. It would have to be, you'd have to have like all of your, if we're gonna use a store, you'd have to have all your alternatives like almost listed out for people to know where to go depending on their area. And then you have to figure out, yeah, and then you also got to figure, you got to be prepared for, like I said, you got to be prepared for backlash, because Walmart's going to try something. They might see that, and they may lower some prices of some essential goods. They might, they might carry out some expand their shit to where they knock down the small businesses that you know that are part of those that alternative list. Like people got to be like 2 or 3 steps ahead, and then I mean, given this economy, you got to find a way to circumnavigate. I don't know, surveillance too. That's a real thing because I mean, people. Walmart has like IT folks. They can look at this and be like, oh, people doing a boycott. Wonder how they're doing it. Look it up. Use some algorithm to figure out, what people are doing, and then create a marketing strategy, a counter marketing strategy to the boycott. You know,
Yeah.
so like people like it has to be a boycott now in the 21st century has to be almost so damn sophisticated. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you made another point. It was a public entity that they went
yeah,
against.
yeah,
So again, that makes it more localized, unless you're going after a federal service.
man,
But it makes it more localized, which the way globalization is going. So for people who don't know, globalization essentially means the idea that corporations are these global entities. They don't necessarily, they may come out of some nation, but they have subsidiaries in other countries. They use labor from other countries, or they use human capital from other countries, and they become these big multinational global corporations. And when you talk about that, like a lot of these corporations, they don't really even care to market to the U.S. I mean, they do because we're their mature consumer base, but their
hmm,
growth is coming from overseas. That's where they envision a lot of their growth coming from. So you also have to look at what share of this corporation's revenue are you, and by you I mean us as black people as a whole,
hmm,
instrumental to. So just because you spend a lot of money at Walmart, though, doesn't mean that like black people making. And I haven't looked up. I don't even know if this data exists or if it exists in a public form. But how much of Walmart's revenue is from black people? It doesn't even make sense for us to boycott a corporation that we're not material to its revenue source.
yep,
Is it really even possible? So I think about something like, and don't quote me on this, but I think somewhere between 40 to 60% of Hennessy's sales are from Black Americans. Makes sense. I
yeah,
drink
yeah.
Hennessy.
I mean,
You
yeah,
drink
that's
Hennessy? I
not.
think
I
I
mean, a
had some.
little bit.
I think I had some Hennessy. I definitely had some Hennessy this week.
I mean, that's that drink. I mean,
And so I'm
shit.
saying, like, something like that. Now, if we were all going to boycott Hennessy, now I don't know for what reason we would do it, but it would make sense because we as a populace are material, super material to their revenue source, meaning we're important to them.
Yeah,
If you don't provide enough revenue to a corporation for them to care, well, you can boycott them all you want. See, when they did it to that public institution, to that public service cared that those black people were going to ride that bus, because
yep,
those black people were material to that public services revenue source.
yep.
Whether it's public or not, it still has a revenue source. It still wants to at least break even.
And before you go on, I gotta make this note because I feel like some people might take that and run with it. This does not mean that we need to find a private entity that that mostly like gets its revenue from black people. and protest it just for the sake of protesting it. Like God, because I know I've seen people try to do this. They look for them. They're like, well, Hennessy mostly give black people money, so we need to just boycott them. Why? Like you have to have a reason. Like, what does hit? Well, I don't even want to pose that question. Like, but I was gonna say, what does Hennessy have to do with you getting shot by the police? But, or not even just reducing the police brutality, like to all the other things we're dealing with the housing market, with food deserts, all of that. It's got to be
Well, we
directly.
could though. Like, if I were going to boycott Hennessy, I would be like, look, how many contracts does Hennessy have with black suppliers or black anything?
True, true,
Something,
true.
some blood, somewhere in their distribution chain, right? Where
Right,
are the black people? Now, if you cannot find any black companies within their distribution chain, then or their supply chain and in their distribution chain, then essentially black people's money is being siphoned off to go to whomever owns the parts of the supply chain and the distribution chain.
right,
So at the end of the day, if I were going to boycott Hennessy, I would look to see if that were the case. And if it were the case that there were no black companies there, then I would say let's have a boycott of Hennessy until they say that they'll do at least 30%. If we're somewhere between 40, let's say we're 55% of their revenue, at least 35 to 40% of their supply chain or their distribution chain should be going through black businesses if those black businesses exist. And if they say that they don't exist, well, then what I need you to do is make a concerted effort and an investment to make sure that those businesses do exist. So find some black people that are interested in whatever you need, because I'm sure that they're there.
right, right,
Invest in them, make their companies, help build their companies up, give them contracts, give them what they call purchase orders. That's what everybody, if you watch Shark Tank, they always, do you have a purchase order? Meaning a company has come to you and say, hey, I want to buy this much and I'm willing to put the money up. Give them purchase orders. These things will help them be able to get loans. If you give
right.
somebody a purchase order, a VC or a bank or somebody else is going to be more willing to give you money because they know somebody else already wants to pay you for their goods. So they see money, they see that you already have potential cash flow coming in.
Yep.
And so that would be a way that I would boycott. Honestly, that would be probably the way that I would boycott in the 21st century. I would look for places in which black people have a high concentration of revenue or provide a high concentration of the revenue. And then look to see if those companies are doing business with black businesses. And if they're not, then we need to boycott those companies that we're material to their revenue until they're willing to give black businesses some of that money, because by right, our money should be going, we would want our money to go back to us.
Right. So to kind of make it full circle, you used the framework that I presented for a viable boycott. You got the problem. You got black. You're not. We're not. There aren't any. There may or may not be any black suppliers or distributors that are associated with, like Hennessy, for example. And what's happening is basically black people's money is getting siphoned off, and we're not. It's not coming back to us. That's the problem, right? So, and then you also got the end result. We want them to do more business with black suppliers, distributors. That's what we want it to look like. So, as a result, then that's when we can be like, all right, black people don't need to don't need to purchase on Hennessy, like, and that's when you can have like an alternative. Hey, look, chill on the Hennessy right now. We need to, go get your cognac, go get something else. It's like just
Hennessy is cognac, but yeah,
yeah,
I mean, you
yeah.
just
See
go
that?
look.
See, look, I'm a lightweight. That's it. See,
Is Remy by the same company? But then you can have the same issue. You can kind of, but you might just have to take a pick.
yeah,
You might have to just take a pick because you might go to an alternative that has the same issue as the place that you're trying to boycott.
That's
That can
true.
happen.
That's true. That is
That can happen.
that's a very real issue. So that what so then what becomes the case then is you need to what becomes the case then is you also
You
have to
gotta, to
do
me, you kind of got to pick one. You pick
yeah,
one. You put the pressure on that one. You get them to change. Then you jump ship.
yeah.
Then you jump
Or
ship.
or if people really about their life, they could get the like pick the bigger entity that has this issue, boycott them, do that, and then find a way to entice the smaller
For
entity,
entity to
yeah,
do
to
it
do the
even
same
and
shit.
say, hey, we'll do it. We'll come to you guys.
Yeah.
We'll come and start spending our money over here
Yep.
if you guys are willing to do this.
Yeah, like the trickle down boycott.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like, and I mean that could work again. And I also think too, and I think something I didn't mention is you also have to do as much research on the alternative as you do the actual thing that you're boycotting. Because you're right, it could be an issue. I mean, you could have an alternative, but the alternative could be worse than the thing you boycotting. You know, so you got to make sure that you minimize or make sure that the alternative is like actually beneficial to what you're trying to do, like your boycott. So
Or at least not detrimental.
yeah, not detrimental basically, because yeah, basically to be a practical. So I mean, like basically what we telling y'all is it's not all lost. I mean, it can be done in the 21st century. It just requires several layers of thinking and some like major strategy. Again, you have to really be able to identify the problem, like not only the subject of the problem, the person, the perpetrator, but also what they're doing and what the problem looks like. Then you have to figure out what the sustainable alternative is that isn't detrimental, compared to the problem first, or the thing that's doing the problem. Then you have to be about their life. You have to be able to do this long term. Long term could be a couple months, could be a year, a couple years. It is what it is. You have to be willing to accept that that's what's going to happen. And then also you have to think, yeah, and finally, you have to want a specific thing from this perpetrator. So in Malcolm's case, he was talking about there being Hennessy doing more business with black suppliers and distributors. It could be something else, like it could be a company that needs to sell certain types of products or lower the prices or hire more workers. It has to be a tangible solution. And then after that, you have to think about ways to sustain or expand the gains you get from the boycott. Because it's not enough just to say, all right, if we're going to use the case of the boycotts, okay, they're desegregated. Cool. Didn't change the behaviors of the bus drivers or the people who drive it or who are riding in it, the white passengers. So they're still going to give you hell. So you got to think about the next stage. Like, okay, what do we need to improve on now? Like, boycotting isn't really, to be real, even though I framed it this way, it's not really a point A and point B. It's really an ongoing process, honestly. I mean, and you
Yeah.
gotta make sure that you get what you want and that it stays there, or that you get more. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that people need to keep in mind, if anything else, like beyond having a goal and a sustainable strategy, is that you got to be able to like hold out even after you get what you want. And I think that's one of the things a lot of folks are missing now. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, there
Yeah.
you go.
I don't even know if you need to hold out even if you get what you want if you ask for the right thing in the first place.
True.
So I don't know what I just don't I have an issue with just the desegregation as the end goal. I think that was the issue with the bus boycott. I
Hmm.
don't think desegregation was a good end goal for them. because it didn't provide them with any. It solved the problem, but how well did it solve that problem?
Yeah, well, look at look at Montgomery, Alabama now. You tell me, you know,
That's what I'm
like
saying. Even legislation sometimes, and this is to kind of get off of boycotts, but even legislation, like let's look at, we have tons of civil rights legislation as well as Brown versus Board of Education. And I just read an article probably like 6, 7 months ago that says schools in the South are just as segregated as they were in 1960.
yeah, no, I was
And
definitely
in some cases worse. I've always known schools to be segregated here in Chicago. I thought that was just how it was.
nah. It's
I was,
always and see, and since we're on that subject, I'm glad you brought that up because we have been bamboozled, right, into like what was supposed to work in terms of like what was supposed to make black people's conditions better. And I think that's the problem. We got away from the things that held us back, and the narrative became, oh, we have to come together. Yeah. And we had to come together. Um I think the problem began when we started this. When the thing became integration, bringing people together, and it became less about dealing with the particular issues that African Americans and particularly African Americans, and not to get cliche, um, and other disadvantaged people were dealing with. Like, instead of focusing on those things that affect them disproportionately, we kind of got into this whole thing of, oh yeah, let's focus on bringing people together, kind of like this symbolic victory. I think the way integration was framed and the way it was carried out in legislation is a perfect example of one of our more modern day symbolic victories. Oh yeah, let's bring people together. Let's put them in the same spaces, and that's it. Like, we're not addressing the huge disparity in that black children face when it comes to their education, the like implicit biases that the teachers have, whether black or white, when it comes to the perception of the black children, cultural competency, like, that's lost when we just blindly, and it's really not integration, it's really assimilation. Like, when they're assimilated into white schools and they lose some of the cultural competency and some of the effects that we don't even know, that we haven't begun to uncover, when they don't really get to see why being black is just as important as anybody else. Like, all of those effects, we don't talk about that. We, like, the narrative got pushed to this sort of symbolic, let's bring people together, let's give people the same access, and it overlooked the whole reality that, like, we needed equitable resources. Like, I'll never forget, like, somebody, a church member at my church back at home, we were talking, and she was like, it was in the sit-ins, everything. Like, she was in the sit-ins, and I was talking to her, like, kind of like, what do you remember? And the first thing she said, I didn't even get into any specific questions about what they were looking for. She said, originally, we weren't asking for integration. We weren't asking to get into white schools. We were asking for us to receive the same resources that white schools get. Like, give us the same publicly funded resources that white schools do. But she said, over time, the narrative changed to integration, get black people being able to go into white institutions, and what's not being said is for our institutions to die out, right? And we call it integration, as opposed to what it really was assimilation. And that's where you get a lot of the crap that's going on now. And what's funny, because it was just a symbolic gesture for the most part, with some marginal effect, this is why you get what you got now. This is why, now it's like, okay, schools are hella segregated. They may not be because, necessarily or explicitly because you black and you can't go to the school, but it's, by zip code or, some you can't afford to go to the private school. And what sucks is we look at segregation and and we look at it as, I want to make sure I frame this right. We look at it as the problem. We look at it as the root of the problem and not an indicator or evidence of the problem. Meaning, like, we don't see it as a result of black people not having the same resources to have their own self-sustaining community in their schools. We see it as, oh, black people aren't interacting with white people enough or other cultures. And so we got to get them over to the schools that just so happen to have better funding. That's the reason why we got to get them over there. Not let's help them have their own institutions. And that doesn't mean that white people can't go to them. They can come to these institutions. We're not saying don't go. We're just saying that we need to have our own shit, just like everybody else, or white folks, let's be honest. And then we'll be good. Then we can talk about cultural integration, because then where we have economic,
on an even playing
yeah,
field.
we have economic parity. I feel like that's how it was supposed to work. Like, ideally, you have people with equitable resources, and then eventually you get cultural integration. That way, I can actually appreciate, like European history, Asian culture, European culture, white American culture,
Yeah,
and not
like
have to.
I'll give you an example, and I swear. So everybody now is a big, like, these cornrows have come back. They come back in different styles. Now these black women, I'm loving it, but I swear to you, usually I'll be fine with people doing certain things, but I swear it doesn't look right on white people. I swear it just doesn't. But that's just my opinion. But what I will say is, if there hadn't been a long history of white people taking black culture, making money off of it, and then black people still being poor after they created that culture, I would have no problem with white women walking around with cornrows. I wouldn't
Right,
care. I
right,
wouldn't care. I
right.
wouldn't care. I just wouldn't. The reason I care is because there's a long, long history of white people taking things from black culture, making it mainstream, making money off of it, saying that this is the greatest thing ever now, and they just created it or just invented
Yep.
it. You know, there's all of this history behind it. So that's why we get so upset when you're talking about these things. It has nothing to do with the fact that you have your hair in cornrows. Honestly,
Yeah.
nobody could
And
care less.
that's my problem. Like, going back to the school example, that's my whole problem. I've been talking to some people about, oh yeah, it's segregated and we gotta have them more like culturally integrated. And I'm like, no, like, it's not just about bringing them together. And you can't say that economic disparity is the reason why we must bring people together. No, people aren't together or don't have the same resources because of economic disparity. And we can talk about cultural integration down the road.
I
That should be a
feel I feel like cultural integration would happen
yeah, that's what I'm
if there
saying.
was economic parity.
That's my entire point. And I think what happens is, and I know part of it is a survival mechanism, but also, like, we can't use it as an excuse. The problem is we see the economic problem. We don't see it as the root. We see it as a part of the problem, and so we use that to go to these schools, and we just completely ignore the cultural and psychological costs that come with that, as opposed to dealing with economic, like inequality as the root. So, like, we go to these schools, these white schools, and we deal with some of the implicit and explicit racism. We deal with the damn, like the whiteness being seen as the norm, and
Yep.
you being like sort of an outlier or a margin.
Yep.
Because I can tell
Yep.
you, being, and I'm saying this like I'm saying this with a grain of salt, but like being able to go to a collegiate institute, a HBCU, where you're the center, and then going to like a Duke or somewhere else and being put on the margin, that has a huge psychological effect. It's a totally different effect. Give and take all the other stuff. So like to me, I think people get so caught up in wanting integration to happen, and they forget that in order for that to work successfully and properly, like the economic economic parity or and parity, for those of y'all that don't know, me basically means that people
Are
have
even.
the yeah are even basically. That just means that they're even. But you got to have that. Like, to me, integration is icing on the cake. The cake is economic parity. Like, and people just want icing. People just want icing. They're like, and that's my entire problem with all of this shit. But I digress. I digress. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I think I used this analogy before, but people seem to always they have a wound and they mistake the gauze for the stitches. The gauze is only meant to be there to help you for a second
exactly.
until you can get the wound closed up somehow, some
Yeah,
sutures. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. We have digressed a little bit from strictly talking about boycotts, but I do think it's important when you're thinking about your objective. If your objective does not have, because at the end of the day, racism wouldn't race. I was just telling you before we started this, right? Racism is a subset of classism, right? At the end of the day, all racism is an allocation of resources based on your phenotypic expression, and phenotype
yeah,
means how you look,
yeah,
the
yeah. It's somebody's
way
personal
that you look.
prejudice, like augmented with the ability of with resource application, the power to allocate resources. So I have this prejudice, and I can enact this prejudice by reallocating resources in such a way that I can reinforce my beliefs. So
Exactly.
you're
and
right.
so and so if you're talking about trying to do something in social justice with respect to race, and you have no economic class structure within your analysis, within your solutions, within the analysis of the problem, then you're not really. This is when they talk about, quote unquote, identity politics, or just wanting to see being happy. This is how people come to be happy to just see Obama in the White House, and they're fine with that. And
Right.
even though if you look at the statistics and data, black people have done worse under Obama's economy rather than better. And you can compare this to stats with Bush in a lot of ways. Home ownership. Now, you could talk about financial crisis and whether
Right.
Bush led
Right.
to that or not, but I would say part of Clinton really led to that. But we can get into that. We can
Yeah,
get
we can
into
do
that
that.
another time. We can
Yeah.
surely get into that another time. Um,
They ain't ready.
but this is when people are fine with just that. This is when people, I mean, she was killing in that Versace dress, but this is when people, are like, oh my God, Michelle Obama was in this Versace dress and I'm so happy now. And that didn't change the material condition of your life.
Right.
Your children are most likely still poor. You're still poor. They're not getting educated correctly. There's still high cost of college tuition. There's still discrimination in the workplace. There's still, there's all of these issues that are material to your life, but you're fine with this, hypnosis of black people faces in high places, and these are just identity politics that have nothing.
But wait, no, no, that's self care. That's self
No,
care.
no, no, no,
Having the
no, no.
joy.
They need to have, well, okay, to be quite honest, I do think there is a little bit of that. I won't discount it completely, right?
Okay.
Seeing people that look like you in these positions
Yeah, yeah, it has a
is
psychological
nice
effect.
and does have a
Yeah.
certain psychological effect. I won't discount that. But the issue again is about the gauze and the stitches.
Yep.
That should just make me feel good enough to be able to say, hey, this isn't the world that it should be. And so I'm now more motivated to go out and really attack the structure. Instead, people are like, we made it.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, and this is what makes it complicated because I would argue, and I can say this for myself, and I guess part of this is my age. Like I think being able to see like him, like President Obama and the first family in office, and being able to see the conditions not change under a black presidency, like allowed me to get to this point to where we even talking about this because I don't know, and this is just being in all fairness to what the psychological effects of seeing somebody in that office because like I don't know if I would necessarily have had the same like level of analyses if President Obama did not like it wasn't president during like those years, like these past 8 years, particularly for me, because I mean I was at because I feel like I wouldn't have been able to be this, and I don't want to toot my horn, I want to say sophisticated, but have this multi-layered level of analysis if he weren't black. And I think there's a certain kind of like ambiguous like effect that President Obama being there has on us. So it's like, yeah, like it's nice seeing somebody there, like in the center of power. But then at the same time, because my conditions aren't changing, nah, like we gotta do something. It's all the more reason we gotta do something about that. Like,
Exactly. I mean, and I would agree with you. I don't know if yeah, I would say it's for my age. I don't know if Obama hadn't been black and been the president right now, if I would have also come to this level. Even though there are other examples of it, just on a smaller scale. My congressman in my
yeah.
war, Bobby Rush, who was an ex-Black Panther and now is a U.S. congressman. We won't. We can let's. We should have we should have a podcast about that. We
we
should have
we
a
will.
podcast
We
just
will.
about these old used to be some Negroes that somehow made it to these high positions in the power structure that they were trying to overthrow.
We gonna get
And
there.
now,
Trust me.
hey,
We
oh
gonna
man! All right,
we
I'm gonna
gonna
stop.
get there. It's levels to this. Y'all see, this is why y'all need to stick with us. Nomics, we talk about this real stuff. We not here to pull no punches. But anyway, so like so yeah. So like to kind of bring it back, like to make this full circle, this is what we're telling you. You have to consider all first off, there is a certain way to boycott. And based on the definition, you remove, you refuse to buy, use, or participate in something or company um, as a way of protesting for until particular changes are made. Just a review. And in order for you to do that in this century, you have to be able to identify the problem and identify the ways in which, particularly identify the perpetrator or perpetrators, and identify the ways in which they are directly affecting Black people in this case. This would be particular. And then once you figure that out, then you have to figure out what is the alternative to this company or entity or whatever. Figure that out, find that, and then you have to ask yourself, what do you want out of this? Do you want something for the perpetrator, from the perpetrator to change? Do you want the abolition of this perpetrator? Do you not want them to exist anymore? Do you want a series of like, do you want other people to do stuff because you're boycotting them? You got to ask yourself what tangible effects you want from boycotting. Then
And I will say that your tangible effects should always include some type of economic inclusion.
yeah, yeah,
If you don't include economics in your solution in what you want, you're not talking about anything.
yeah. Boycotts are inherently economic. So if you don't have an economic like basis for your stuff outside of just being mad and frustrated with the society, the inequities that we deal with. Not to say that you're wrong for being mad, but if you don't have a tangible plan to change this materially, like a boycott's not going to work. You can't go into a boycott and not have some economic understanding. And it doesn't have to be anything complex and up in the air, but have an economic understanding of why it affects Black people. It ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work. Like, and so you gotta have, again, sustainable alternative. You gotta know what you want. Be ready for backlash. And then once you get there and you get what you want, make sure that's gonna be lasting.
Yep.
Don't just let it be a moment. Let it be sustainable. Let it be as permanent as possible. And like, and this is gonna, and to kind of flow into what we're gonna talk about on our next next podcast. Yeah, like, you know, people talk about, well, yeah, man, we should start our, like, you know, instead of boycotting, we should start our own business because we got this $1 trillion purchasing power. And guess what, y'all? That is a fucking myth. We do not have that amount of money to just spend collectively to do that. And we're gonna talk about that.
Well, we got it to spend.
We got it to spend.
What do we get spend on? And
yeah, it's nothing. It's not. We don't have a bank account. We don't have an African American bank account that got $1 trillion that we just ain't tapping into yet.
What do you mean?
You know what? We gonna talk about that on the next episode.
On the next episode.
On the next episode. Go ahead and end it with a turn track. We go ahead and end it. We get hype in here.
Nowhere near it. No, I don't know why that reminded me of like the next episode of Dragon Ball Z.
Oh no, I'm about to play the song so we can.
Oh, you about to play it?
Yeah. All right, give me 1 minute.
Cause I mean, I got some songs up here. You realize I can't hear anything.
Oh.
It's playing through your headphones, dude. Oh, you're playing Caroline.